We're going to kick this off with the showdown in Beijing as the U.S. and China battle it out over trade deals and respect. The Trump administration's economic aid team has landed with the mission of getting China to do the right thing. But just yesterday, China forced one of the world's largest tech companies into a joint venture that puts its Chinese partner in control. This as China's state media claims it is not afraid to put up a fight. So the battle is joined. And joining me now, Fox Business correspondent Susan Lee, Rebeccah Heinrichs, Hudson Institute senior fellow, and David Nelson, Belpointe Asset Management chief strategist. Susan, let me start with you. China's belligerence all the way up to the meeting itself, including saber rattling, and then this move yesterday with Arm Holdings. Speaks a lot, I think.
Not just Arm Holdings. Don't forget they're holding up the Qualcomm NXP deal until these negotiations finalize, and if we get some sort of final deal. But apparently they're still far apart. So we have the U.S. setting these bottom line expectations, which is far from what the Chinese are willing to give. And as you know, Chinese President Xi Jinping, he also has to adhere to the nationalistic, the people of China, since he is leader for life. You know, right now, we're seeing media across China, whether it's social media, in the newspapers, they want the Chinese president to stand tough and stand down the U.S. because they feel at this point, since they are a growing economy set to overtake the U.S. as the world's largest economy, why should we give up our goods?
Well, here's, listen, on this side of the pond, if you will, David, all we hear about is how America is going to lose this thing because we depend so much and we're such, lazy capitalists that we're not ready to pay an extra $20 for a flat screen TV or whatever. But China sells us almost $550 billion in goods and services. There's no other market to replace ours.
You said it just the other day. You pointed out who's got the most to lose. They clearly do. They have the surplus right now. Make no mistake, they are an adversary on almost every single level, geopolitical, even military, and of course on trade. If we don't do something now about the theft of intellectual property, that's the crown jewels. Literally the crown jewels. If we don't do something about that, when are we going to do it?
I think the clock, by the way, I think is running out. In fact, because now, if it's not now, it won't be 5 years from now. Rebeccah, it's not just economic belligerence, right? We learned that China is quietly been installing defense missile systems in the Spratly Islands. Of course, there was this incident, and I think it was with the U.S. Pilots today. I mean, the list goes on and on. Every single day, this sort of thumbing their nose at America.
Yeah, they're an adversary. They're a competitor in just about every single area. And, President Trump, he's commander-in-chief. He's also the country's CEO. And here, when it comes to China, you have a blending of the two. Intellectual property, as you just said, that is the crown jewels, and that's where it blends with national security as well as economics. But the other thing here that gives China a little bit more leverage, I think, over the U.S. is because we need China's help when it comes to denuclearizing North Korea. And that is the priority for the Trump administration. We need that. We cannot do it without the Chinese. And if they provide diplomatic cover to North Korea, we can't do it.
So, Rebeccah, then let me ask you, because you understand this better than anyone else, the trade-off, including these man-made, now militarized islands, including their global expansionist, tendencies and their ambition, the new Silk Road. They have global ambitions. They have already stated to the world they want to replace America. They've got the China 2025 program. Ultimately, it's just not in technology, but they want to have the world's reserve currency. They want to be what America is now.
Absolutely. And this is why President Trump's national security strategy and national defense strategies both say that no longer is the United States seeking parity. The United States is seeking strategic superiority and specifically competing with China and Russia. And so, we've got the right objectives here, but this is going to be a long race because China has been running it way, much faster and much longer than the United States has. But so we're not going to solve it with this, one little economic trip we got going on right now. But it's certainly a piece of the puzzle, and we got to keep at it.
Susan, we may not solve it with this particular trip, but I thought what was interesting about the stock market and the reversal today, it was led by Boeing.
That's right.
Boeing is the proxy. It is the proxy for this so-called trade war between America and China. And for Boeing to take off the way that it did today, it suggests to me that maybe some smart money out there thinks that something will get done.
Yeah, we were looking at the revenues that Boeing actually draws from the Asia Pacific and China. That's at 13%. But don't forget, planes have been threatened, as part of the tariff package. If the U.S. launches tariffs on Chinese-made goods. Well, China is going to do the same also on U.S.-made goods, and that includes possibly planes being made by Boeing. But yes, Caterpillar also was a decliner today, but a bit of reversal. Caterpillar gets about a quarter of their sales from China. Apple, Nike, Starbucks is building a store every 15 hours in China. So from a stock perspective, if we have a protracted trade war per se, there are stocks and there are U.S. companies that could be hurt in this.
Maybe this is why we hear more from these large corporations about this, David, like, hey, let's not fan the fear so much. Tim Cook keeps trying to play diplomat, if you will.
Yeah.
I mean, because he's in an interesting position. Apple manufactures a lot of their products there. It's also end market for them, but, they're only the number 5 smartphone manufacturer. They would like a more even playing field as well, I'm sure.
Tim is a globalist in every sense of the word, and he's got 2 stakes in China. One, they want to expand the market. Riling or getting on the wrong side of President Xi, that's not in the business plan, so they got to do something about that. They're already expanding even more. Just in February, they announced that they're going to expand another data center to support their iCloud services. So they want to get into China, and they've been a big beneficiary of globalism. Unfortunately, our Heartline and a lot of our other businesses just have not.
Rebeccah, what do you make of the notion, though, that certainly from a public relations point of view, the Chinese government controls the media there? President Trump has a hostile media. He's got the opposition party. He even has some in his own party, along with corporate America, all pushing against his aggressive stance against China, whereas Xi has a strong advantage because no one's going to publicly dispute him.
No, you're exactly right. One of the things President Trump, one of the points he continues to make is each country is a sovereign nation, and so you have to deal with it as it is. And China is not an open democratic republic like what we have. And so that is, what the Chinese have to their advantage. And so I wouldn't trade it. I don't want that in exchange for what we have. But it does make it a little bit more challenging for President Trump. But again, he's going to do what's best for the U.S. The Chinese are going to do what's best for the Chinese. And in the end, I think national security for the U.S., in particular with North Korea, is going to win out.
So let you handicap it for us. And China will probably get more concessions because, and President Trump was very, with this meeting between North and South Korea, when he spoke about that, he complimented Xi twice. He made sure that China heard this compliment. So I think Rebeccah's spot on there. So what concessions do you see beyond national security? I mean, China's got to give us something. What would we accept, do you think?
I think it will be more ownership, probably majority ownership when it comes to auto players in China. You can sell autos, and also more access to the financial services sector.
If I'm Xi, you know what I'm trying to get? I'm trying to get a big contract for the rails, Amtrak and other things. They've got those amazing rails. He lands that big contract. He gives us, he doesn't force us into joint ventures. He opens up the markets for cars and other things. I think that's the win-win for him.
That could be, but I think what he's going to hope from us is that we're going to try to defend the status quo. There's risk going against a trade bully like China. He knows that. They've been playing that card for the last 20, 30 years. We got to do something about it.
First time anyone stood up to him.